Hello, everyone. Happy first day of summer. I hope everyone is doing well. I want to first thank everyone for being here today for another super insightful webinar, a 30-minute guide to crafting outstanding college admissions essays. So I'm Sesson. I'm the Sales and Marketing Coordinator at CE Tours. I know many of you are very well informed about the services that we offer, but for those who do not, we have assisted thousands of educators worldwide by arranging educational travel experiences for student groups, especially those from low income and underserved backgrounds. And many of our clients are educators, which is why we like to provide informative webinars each month, such as this one. So in this 30-minute session, we will delve into the art of writing exceptional college admissions essays. You'll learn practical strategies to help your students create compelling narratives that stand out in the application process. And throughout this webinar, our speaker will share actionable advice that you can implement to guide your students in expressing their unique stories and strengths effectively in their essays. Not only that, but you'll also hear real life examples of successful essays illustrating the power of personal storytelling. Throughout the webinar, I do encourage you guys to use the Q&A box so we can address questions throughout the webinar. And then if we have some time at the end, we will address any additional questions. Now, I'm excited to introduce our expert speaker for today, Holly Moore, a dedicated college counselor at Uplift Education in Dallas, Texas, who brings over 8 years of experience in guiding students toward their college and career goals. Her passion for advocating for students from diverse backgrounds and empowering them with the necessary knowledge and support to succeed in the college admissions process makes her uniquely qualified to lead this webinar. So grab your notes and please join me in giving a very warm virtual welcome to Holly Moore. Take it away, Holly.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing great this day. So I'm going to lead you through how to help your students craft an admissions essay that can help them access higher education and scholarships. So first things first, why do students need to write a college admissions essay? Well, as you know, our students are more than just a transcript. They're more than just a GPA or a test score. And the college admissions essay helps the reader learn more about the student. It helps them learn that they are more than just that transcript. It helps provide context, the what, the why. Sometimes our students might have a rough sophomore year and their GPA takes a hit. The college admissions essay gives them the opportunity to explain, to show the what, the why did it happen? Maybe their sophomore year, they had a parent who was dealing with a health issue and they had to step up and help take care of their siblings, get them up, get them on the school bus, come home from school, cook dinner, so that their plate was just really full and school wasn't the main priority anymore. It allows colleges to have a more holistic approach for admissions. So as we know, in the past year and a half, a lot has happened in the college higher education space. So we had the Supreme Court decision for affirmative action. And I know for me in the state of Texas, there has been a lot of political stuff going on with DEI. And the thing is, our colleges want to admit diverse student bodies. And with the Supreme Court decision and with what some states are doing with DEI, the college admissions essay is one place where they can help create that diverse class through a holistic approach. And for our students who, you know, maybe they had a blip one year, or maybe they're not the best test taker, they might be a maybe in that college admissions office file, but with a compelling college admissions essay, they could maybe move from a maybe file to a yes. So that is the importance of the college admissions essay. So let's talk about the prompts. Every year we all wait to see, are they going to change the prompts? Are there going to be new prompts? Well, Common App has announced what the prompts are, so let's talk about them. So Common App has 7 different prompts, and they pretty much give students the full opportunity to pick which prompt is going to work best for them. So prompt 1, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. This is a great prompt that a lot of students will probably lean into. And it's also a prompt that could probably benefit them if they were applying to other colleges that don't use Common App or for scholarship purposes. Prompt 2, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So if a student's choosing this in our professional role, we want to make sure the student understands that it is okay to write about failure. Failure happens to all of us. It's not the failure, it's what we do afterwards. And that's the story that they want to tell. 3, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? I'm going to circle back to prompt number 1 because I have a student who used this prompt 2 years ago, and she had a beautiful essay. She was an outstanding academic student, but this, I think, put her over the top when she applied to some of her competitive schools. She wrote about her Muslim faith and how in middle school she wore her hijab to school and how uncomfortable she was because of the comments people would make and the racist remarks and just some of the nasty comments that she would get from some of her peers about her hijab, and to the point that she became so uncomfortable that she chose to no longer wear her hijab to school. Well, in 10th grade, she had the opportunity in a class to do a project, and she chose to do a podcast exploring Islam and Christianity. And she wrote this beautiful essay about the challenge of making the decision to no longer wear her hijab, to the point of in 10th grade being like, you know what, I want to step up. I want to educate people. I want other people to not go through what I went through, because I want people to realize what a hijab is, why it's important. And it was a very beautiful essay. The next prompts, prompt 4, reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? This is a tricky one because sometimes you might get the student who wants to throw in there like, oh, well, for my 16th birthday, I got a car. Is that really going to be an impactful, meaningful essay that's really going to show the reader who you are? So make sure you really work with students if they want to work on that prompt. Prompt 5, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. Prompt 6, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? I love this prompt because it gets the reader the chance to see the student as a lifelong learner. And I think that's what colleges are looking for. They want students who are not only going to show up to college and get that degree in biology or that degree in education, but also someone who has a love of learning and is willing to seek out new information. And then prompt 7 is share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. This is where it's going to work really great for a lot of students in different states that have their own application platforms. Like here in Texas, we have Apply Texas. And so I usually encourage my students to use prompt 7 because they're writing an essay prompt for Apply Texas. So we can plug that in, and so we can work smarter, not harder. No matter what prompt your students choose, help them understand what is the prompt asking, because if you don't answer the prompt, then you didn't do your job. And then can you show the reader your story through the prompt? Because that's the other part of the puzzle. Can you show the reader who you are? What is your story? What is compelling about you? Why should you be a student at their school? And then is this a prompt that you could use for college applications and scholarships? Because we know seniors have a lot on their plates. At my school, we're an IB high school, so my students are preparing for IB exams at the end of senior year. You might be at a high school where your students are taking AP courses or dual credit. There's a lot on these kids' plates. And so if we can help them work smarter, not harder, write a really compelling essay that they can tweak for multiple things, then it's going to benefit them in the long run. So let's talk about getting started. So we want our students to be able to tell their story. What is their unique personal story that's going to give the application that holistic feel more than just what their transcript is telling? We want them to be able to show and don't tell. We don't want to just tell them that we're hardworking. We want to show them that we are. remind them that they have 250 to 600 words. And we want to stick with that within that. Like if they write their essay in Google Docs and copy and paste it into Common App is going to cut them off. So we don't want them to overwrite. We also don't want them to underwrite, because if they don't write 250 words, they're probably not telling much of a story. Make sure we're answering the prompt, and then focus on high school. Sometimes things have happened in our students' lives that did impact them. Their parents may have gotten divorced in 5th grade, and that is a very impactful experience in their lives. But we want them to focus on high school, because who you are in 5th grade is not who you are in 11th grade, almost 12th grade. There's a big developmental gap. So I encourage students to always focus on 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. What happened in those 3 years that you can share that has shown who you are, what you're shaping to become. We want to encourage students to write this and not write that. So what should students write? Well, I know for me, working with students, sometimes they feel like, Miss, I don't really have anything that important to write about, because they feel like because they didn't spend a summer researching cancer or, hiking a mountain, that they don't have a worthy story. But there are some great topics that have worked for students, and I share those with them. So one, riding the subway alone for the first time. It can be a very great picture to paint for a reader, but also it shows, the independence and, overcoming fear and, seeing that they can do something. Folding 1,000 paper cranes. This is an essay that I really love, and I share it with my students. And in a couple slides, you're going to have the opportunity to access this essay. Another one, fostering kittens. This is a student who wanted to be a veterinarian, and they started fostering kittens. It was a great story, and it connected to that future. And then finding your voice and using it. I had a student who wrote a really great essay using the Little Mermaid as the basis. We all know the story of the Little Mermaid. She has a beautiful voice. Ursula wants her voice. She's willing to give it up so that she can be on land with the people. But then she realizes, like, not having her voice, it kind of changed who she was. It took away a part of her. And so my student used that story to narrate how she felt that she didn't have much of a voice, that she didn't feel she could speak up, and then finding that voice within her and being confident enough to share her voice and speak up for herself. We don't want students to write stories that aren't going to grab the reader or going to be a repetitive story. So all of our students have experienced COVID. And so I really encourage students not to write about COVID, because it's not a unique experience. Sports is life metaphors. I think every year I always have one student who wants to write the essay like, it was the last 5 seconds of the game and they inbounded the pass to me and the game was on the line. It was all up to me. It's a good story, but it's a story that's been told lots of times. So I try to encourage them to find a different avenue. The mission trip story. This is another one that can rub people the wrong way potentially. In my demographic, I work with a lot of first-gen low SES students, so I don't really deal with this, but I know in my experience in going to other conferences and other workshops that counselors have talked about the student who goes on a mission trip to, Haiti, and they didn't realize people could be so poor, and it kind of comes off as a little tone deaf. So I encourage students to stay away from those kinds of stories. And then lastly, the my blank is my hero. This is a story that I think a lot of our students lean into, like, especially if they come from like a home with a single parent or they were raised by a grandparent, and they want to write this beautiful essay about how my grandma, my mom impacted my life and really shaped who I am. And while that is true, and it's a beautiful essay 9 times out of 10, at the end of the day, you don't learn anything about the student. But if I was the admissions counselor, I'd be like, I want to admit your grandmother. Your grandma sounds amazing. I want her to come to school here. I had a student a couple years ago. She actually just graduated from Tulane's 3+3 law program. And I might have made her cry just a little bit on draft 3 because she kept writing this beautiful essay about her mom. But I could not get her to pivot to make it about her. So I was like, okay, you frame this, give it to your mom, but we need to start over because this essay is not going to do what we want it to do. It's not going to get you the traction to get into that kind of competitive program. She did change it, and then she did get into Tulane, but it was a beautiful essay. It just didn't teach me, it didn't show who she really was. It showed who the mom was. So how do we make the ordinary extraordinary? So our students might struggle. Like, I don't feel like it did anything that really is like, wow. Like, they haven't climbed Mount Everest. They haven't been on Shark Tank to make a pitch. And that's okay. 99.8% of these students haven't either. So we got to reassure our students they have a story and colleges want to hear it. They want to see if you are the type of student that they want on their campus. If you can write a compelling essay about how you persevere, that's the kind of student colleges want. They want someone who is going to come to college because they know that there are going to be obstacles. And sometimes you're not going to do well on that biology test. And it's not about that. It's what are you going to do next? Are you going to be the student who's like, you know what? I didn't do well. I'm going to go to tutoring. I'm going to go to the professor's office hours. Can you show them that you have the traits and the values that are going to align with their university to be successful? And then remember that great essays can come from unique activities or passions. I'm going to go back to this making paper cranes, which I'm going to share with you here in a minute. A contrasting activity to your profile. So an engineering major who has a passion for crochet, because colleges are going to assume the engineering major is probably in, the robotics club or the math club, and that they have a high math ACT score. But how intriguing is it when you have an engineering student who's also taught themselves to crochet, and now they crochet blankets for the nursing home? That's a really compelling essay. An experience or an object is a metaphor that explores your life and personality. A couple years ago, I had a student, she wrote a really fantastic essay about who she was through the lens of driving and cars. And she used that as a metaphor. So she talked about, overcoming challenges and obstacles. And she wrote it as like when you're driving, you hit traffic or there's a detour on the road, and finding where you fit in, and made it relate to how she parks her car in the parking lot. Like, just those little things made those little ordinary details about herself extraordinary because she brought in this metaphor that was really cool.
We have a question, Holly.
Yeah.
From Chanel. She says, what about a student during their freshman year? They had to take care of their little sibling because their mom worked in a factory, so the older sibling had to care for the little sibling during COVID. It shows responsibility.
That is where you can bring in COVID. That is where I would be like, let's sit down and write this essay and see where we go with it. Because that is a compelling story, and that does impact the student. And that does show that the student is someone who took on a lot of responsibility at a very young age. And so in that case, that would be a great essay. I think sometimes with that COVID essay, sometimes students want to pivot to, man, it was really tough freshman year to learn math because we were virtual. That's not the greatest essay, but saying, you know what, my mom was working and it was COVID and I had to take care of my little sibling as a freshman while trying to learn to be a high school student, that could be a good essay. So definitely, I think the context is really important in those generalizations. Like COVID, was hard for everyone learning how to do math online in a virtual classroom. Don't write that. COVID in terms of I had to take care of my sibling and kind of almost be a parent. That's an important story. All right. So let's talk about brainstorming. So if you see this QR code, you can scan it. It's going to take you to a resource that's going to list all 7 common app prompts and ways you can help your students kind of brainstorm. So what I encourage students to do is, especially if they're applying to more competitive schools, if they're applying to schools that are more selective, that, are reach schools for them, then I encourage them to let's look at 2 or 3 prompts and then kind of do some brainstorming, and then we can kind of hone in on which one is going to tell your best story. Sorry. For some reason, my battery is going low. Let me see. So the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? That's Common Apt Prompt 2. So what I have the students do, and it's on this QR code, is they write a specific list of challenges, setbacks, and failures they faced. And I tell them, don't judge themselves, just write down all the failures and setbacks you've had. And then we pivot to step 2, which choose a few of those options. And let's talk about how did you respond to that situation and what did you learn from it? So if it was the failure of, you failed a biology test your freshman year, like, well, how did you respond to it? Did you go ask the teacher for assistance? Did you get a study buddy? Like, what did you do? Once they have chosen a few options from the question above and talk about how they responded to the situation and what did they learn, then we go to step 3, which is I want them to use one of those challenges and setbacks and elaborate. Describe the emotions you felt at the time. What are the steps you took to overcome? Reflect on the impact or the lessons that you have learned. And the great thing is each of the prompts with this QR code have the same 3 steps to kind of help walk you and the student through. The student can do it on their own, or you can sit down and work with them together. The next thing is we want students to start with a hook. So we want to hook the reader. The student only has 250 to 600 words that they can have to share their story. And on average, the typical admissions file reader is going to read 50 files a day. So they're reading 50 essays. That's 3,000 words, 30,000 words. So we want our students to be able to grab the admissions reader in the first few sentences so that they want to keep reading, and that we want them to grab that essay and be like, man, I need to share this with the people in my office. And then I encourage students, if you're funny, be funny, but be true to yourself. If you're not someone who has a natural sense of humor, don't fake it. Because it's going to come off as you're trying too hard. Be yourself, because that's going to come through in your essay. So here are some hooks that I've seen in my students' writing before. The yellow yarn slid through my fingers and I fumbled to make my first chain. I was not nearly as advanced as the other hookers. Now that grabs you. Like, if you don't know anything about crochet, you're like, wait a minute, hookers? So this is a whole essay about crochet. They open it up, they give you a description. You know what color the yarn is. You know it slid through their fingers. The next hook, my voice was taken from an evil squid woman. That's from my student who wrote their essay about finding their voice and comparing it to Little Mermaid. And then lastly, how much are you looking to make? This was the question I had feared. A wrong answer could have meant I wasn't ready for the job and I'd look like a fool. But if I answered wrong for myself, I'd be stuck knowing I could have asked for more. So encouraging students to write something that will engage the reader early, kind of paint that picture and help them want to keep reading, it will help their case. So 1,000 paper cranes. This is one of my favorite essays. I use it every year, probably for the past 3 or 4 years with my students. It is an essay that comes from Johns Hopkins Essays at Work. That QR code will take you to that essay. And what I love about it is it also gives you the admissions office feedback. So the admissions office is telling you why they think this essay works. And I think that helps you as a professional working with a student on the college essay to help them understand what are the college admissions officers looking for. So this essay opens with having explored the myths from ancient Greece, Rome, and Egypt. My curiosity was piqued in 8th grade by a simple legend from Japanese lore. If you fold 1,000 paper cranes, the gods will grant you one wish. I took it as a challenge. And this is just a really great essay because it's something that is relatable that any of our students that we work with could do. Any of our students could set off to make a goal to fold 1,000 paper cranes. You don't have to be the smartest in your class. You don't have to have the most wealth to do these things. This is something that is accessible to our students and I think helps them see, like, something that seems ordinary can be extraordinary. So like I said, I really like this. I use it every year when I start teaching the college admissions essay to my juniors, and then I refresh it with my seniors. So now we're ready for the first draft. So I encourage students to write to tell their story. I encourage them not to think about word count on the first draft. When they get in their head and think I have to write like 400 to 600 words, then they get stuck on just trying to meet that word count. I encourage them to just write. Put your fingers on the keyboard or grab the pen in your hand and start writing. Because if you end up writing 1,000 words, I can probably help you narrow it down to just the best of the best in those 1,000 words. What some of us might call free writing, I like to call it word vomit. I tell my students, just sit down and word vomit. Write now, edit later. This is a process that has worked really well for me for the past 8 years. The first year that I did this with a student, she is a student, she went on to Vanderbilt, and now she is in her first year of her PhD program at Stanford. And she was so excited. She came into my office. She goes, Miss Moore, she's like, can you read this? I sat down last night and I word vomited just like you told me to. And I was able to go through there, and there were some things we took out, but there were some really good gems that ended up shaping a wonderful essay for her. And then I encourage students to let go of what they've learned for the past 11 years in education. Introduction, body, conclusion format. You don't necessarily need that very defined format when you're writing a college admissions essay. And then lastly, we have to break them out of that mindset that they've been taught for the past 11 years that you don't write from the first person. In this kind of essay, I is embraced. It should be about you. It's your story. So I encourage them, I. I want to see lots of I's in this. Once we have the first draft, what I encourage students to do is step back and wait before reading, because all of us tend to be our worst critics. And so I want the student to step back, maybe give it 24 hours before they look at it. That way they have time to kind of just decompress, step away, and not be so critical. Then when they come back and read it, I want them to ask themselves 2 questions. Am I the focus of the essay? And did you answer the prompt? If they can confidently say, yes, when I read this essay, I can see that I am the focus and I did answer the prompt, that's when I want them to go to someone that they trust, someone that they respect. It could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, it could be someone else in their life. And I ask that person to read the essay and ask the person to answer the questions. Does it sound like them? And did it answer the prompt? And if it did, then you are well on your way towards that final draft. And then lastly, ask that person to provide some edit suggestions. Now, this is not a time, if a student asks you to read that essay and give feedback, this is not the time to get out the red pen and mark it up. Because yes, there might be some grammar and spelling issues, fix those, but don't get so obsessed about the grammar and the spelling and the punctuation. Because this is kind of a personal, it should feel like a journal entry. It should not feel like a English 1301 essay that they will write their freshman year in college. Good grammar, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I work with a number of students every year who English is not their first language, and I would be doing them a disservice if I completely over tweak their essay to make it to where it's not really their true voice. It's okay if there's a couple of errors. They're not reading for grammatical purposes. Now, if it's blatant, they will notice it, but they're not going to look and be like, ooh, like they had a run-on sentence there. We want our students to show and not tell. So we want students to include the 5 sentences. How did it feel? What was the smell? What colors did they see? What were the sounds there? We want students to be able to show the emotion in their essay instead of just telling them. So if I'm writing an essay and I am telling the reader that I was nervous, instead of writing I was nervous, show them. I could feel a tingle in my arms. My hands were cold and clammy. My mind raced. My heart was pounding. That is something that as a reader, I can feel, I can sense, I can visualize in my head. And then I feel like I'm transported into that moment with the student instead of them just saying, well, I was nervous. Encourage them to use figurative language to help paint that picture in your reader's mind. I had a student write a beautiful essay. She's an undocumented student, and she wrote about how the public library was her oasis. And so the first line of her essay is, "I have never saved a book, but books have saved me." And the entire essay is how she came to this country at the age of 2, and she taught herself to read and write by accessing books in the public library. And it was just an absolutely beautiful, like, it was one of those essays that I think by the end I was like ready to cry. Like the sun, I will continue to rise. Some crayons are sharp, some are pretty, some have weird names, and they are all different colors, but they all have to learn to live in the same box. Those are different ways that students can show and not just tell something. From the edits to the final draft, encourage students to you can make a checklist as a counselor or as their advisor. Does it have a hook? Is it descriptive? Does it have a flow? Do the transitions make sense? You know, you don't want them going like, well, in 11th grade, this happened, and then 9th grade, this happened, and then now this is happening. It needs to have some sort of flow that makes sense. Most importantly, does it sound like the student? Then, make sure the spelling and the punctuation and grammar are on track. But like I said, I don't obsess about red penning them to death over spelling, punctuation, and grammar, because this is a glimpse into their personal journal almost. It's a glimpse into who they are. It's not a college English 1301 essay. Looking to make sure they're within the word count 250 to 600. And then make sure that you have a little external feedback before you're ready to finalize that draft and submit it with your application. In conclusion, students should realize that their last sentences do matter. So we don't want them to summarize. It's not an academic essay. They don't need to restate a thesis or what they've already written. Encourage your students not to state the obvious or tell someone what they are. If you wrote 500 words with examples of being hardworking, you don't need to wrap up the essay. And that's why I am hardworking, period. Like, you have already shown them that you're hardworking. You don't have to state that. They should know that by the end. And don't end with a whimper. Like, don't write this really strong essay and at the end, you just just throw a couple sentences on there. Make sure the reader is glad that they read the entire essay to the very end. So what students should do is they can use their ending to come full circle, connect their conclusion to their introduction. They can be future focused. So we know that students, when they're applying to college, the purpose is they want to get a degree so they can get a job. So if they can connect their future into the essay, and these experiences have reaffirmed my desire to be a veterinarian. It helps connect that for the reader and show the college admissions reader that this student has goals and they see themselves going to college and beyond. And also they can help connect to their values. So if, colleges have values, students have values, if they can connect their values in that essay, it can help the reader be like, okay, this is a student that their values align with what our values are. They would be a really good student to have on our campus. And if your students struggle with the values thing, College Essay Guy, I added his link in my resources at the end of the presentation. He has a really good exercise for the values exercise that I find really effective for students to help identify their values. And it's a really simple exercise, but it is really effective. And then we want students to write once, but apply often. So like I said, I encourage students to work smarter, not harder. My students have a lot on their plates. A lot of them are going to be first-gen college students. A lot of them have jobs outside of school, plus a rigorous high school curriculum. So the less hard, the more that they can get done in one essay, the better. So a strong college admissions essay will be able to be tweaked for multiple college applications and scholarships. Encourage your students not to address colleges by name in the essay. Like, I had a student once send their essay to Texas A&M and they forgot to take out the part where they mentioned that they've always wanted to be a Longhorn. That's probably not a good look in your college essay when you're saying you really want to be the other school. And then we can work smarter, not harder. So if I have a student in the state of Texas who's applying to Apply Texas, they're probably going to use essay prompt A. But guess what? They can also apply to Common App prompt 7 using that same essay. So now they only had to write one essay. The same goes for my friends out there who have students who are applying to the University of California system. UC question 3 is very similar to the Common App prompt number 1. So our students can write one essay and use it for both things. So hopefully this 30 minutes gave you some tips and tricks that will help you navigate helping your students write a really compelling college admissions essay. I've been doing this 8 years. I learned something new every year. And so I hope this gave you resources. This QR code will give you a lot of resources that you can utilize and also use with your students. So thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. And if you need to get in contact with me, my info is here.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your knowledge with our audience. Lots and lots of tips in this presentation. So I hope everyone was taking notes. Throughout the session, I couldn't help but think, like, where was this presentation 15 years ago when I was applying to college? I could have used it. So normally we would ask you all to leave questions in the chat box, but since we are over the 30-minute mark, if you guys have any additional questions, you can email Holly. Her email's right there on the screen. But before you go, I do want to let you know to be on the lookout for a post-webinar email. It will include a PDF of today's presentation, the recording of this session, and then some useful resources that you can share with your students or your colleagues. So if you are interested in learning more about CE Tours, you can email me to book a 15-minute call. My contact info will also be in that post-webinar email. And do not forget to follow us on social media at CE Tours on all platforms, just to stay updated on the next webinar to come. Thank you once again, Holly, for sharing your expertise, and a big thank you to all of the attendees for joining us. Thank you for being patient during our little technical difficulty. So I'm wishing you all success in guiding your students through their college admissions journey. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.